Hello and welcome to Women in World Religions, which is a cross-coded course between gender and RLCT. My name is Professor McCann, and I wanted to say at the outset that we as faculty are trying to make this transition online as painless as possible. I will be having virtual office hours in Blackboard every Wednesday from 10 to 11:30. You can also email or send your number to me and I can call you if you wish to discuss anything or you have any questions. I'm going to start by going over the syllabus. The first assignment is called Gendering the Academy and is worth 15%. The second is a reflection paper worth 20%. The final essay is worth 30% and the take-home test is 25%. Participation will be based on 5 substantive comments that you make on the forum created in the discussions on Blackboard. Now, of course, you can do more than this if you wish, but you'll be graded on 5. In the first lecture, which is now posted, I talk about the development of the field of gender studies and the way in which it is usually very personal for many of us. Much of the change in the university and high school curriculums emerged from second and now third wave feminists who wanted both to teach in the academy and to change what was being studied. So we see that as a form of engaged scholarship that seeks to change the world. The RLCT department at Nipissing has from its founding made study of gender and religion one of its pillars, partly of course because of its close relationship with GSJ. In fact, at my interview, I was told that my CV was flagged because I studied women as part of my research. I was very shocked by this, as generally research on women still is often considered to be marginal. And so we see that, as they say, the personal is political, and I hope that you will be able to think of these topics as we move through and what it means to you in your life. I've had students in the past interview their mothers and grandmothers about their experiences, and as Viola says, we think back through our mothers, and I would add through our grandmothers. In this course, we will be looking at how religion shapes gender identity, but also how women have reshaped religion. We will be looking at theology, ritual, and the lived experience of women across a variety of traditions. In the first lecture, I discussed the idea developed by Marxist historian Sheila Rowbotham that until the 1970s, women were largely what she calls hidden from history. The changes both within religious and secular organizations can be seen in the movement to have Viola Desmond, civil rights activist and businesswoman, placed on the Canadian $10 bill. Her story, like so many women in Canada, has been largely unknown to most people until very recently. And in the case of Viola Desmond, we see the intersectionality of both gender and race. I would be interested to hear in the discussion board if you learned about Desmond in your middle or high school. Viola Desmond, businesswoman, civil rights activist, was born in 1914. She passed away in 1965. Desmond built a career in business and was a mentor to young Black women in Nova Scotia. In 1946, she challenged racial discrimination when she refused to leave the segregated whites-only section of the Roseland Theatre in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. Desmond was arrested, jailed overnight, and convicted without legal representation for an obscure tax offense. Despite the efforts of the Nova Scotia Black community to assist her appeal, Viola Desmond was unable to remove the charges against her and went unpardoned in her lifetime. Desmond's courageous refusal to accept an act of racial discrimination provided inspiration to later generations of Black people in Nova Scotia and in the rest of Canada. I don't know whether Desmond was religious, although I have my suspicions, because certainly the civil rights movement in the US was powered by the African American churches. This connection between civil rights and religion is a clear one, as religion in this case was often seen as a liberatory force and a call for equality and human rights. In this slide, we see an image of Barbara C. Harris, who was the first woman to be ordained a bishop in the Episcopal Church and the Worldwide Anglican Communion. She passed away at age 89 this year. I remember very clearly seeing this photograph for the first time and being stopped by my tracks. To see a woman in the regalia of a bishop was a moment I will always remember. Harris was consecrated as a bishop, and her rise to this position broke centuries of precedent for tens of millions of Christians in the Anglican Communion, which has members in more than 165 countries. Harris was born in Philadelphia. She was active in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, traveling to register Black voters in Mississippi and taking part in the march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama in 1965. So we can see clearly the changes that were happening politically and socially, no doubt, inspired her to also move radically outside the traditional roles for women. Harris was ordained as a deacon in 1979 and then as a priest at age 50. When she was elevated to the position of bishop in 1989, she became not only the first woman, but the first African American woman to take what Robinson, a fellow Anglican priest, calls a huge step. Harris faced vitriol in taking on this new role. Robinson recalled an incident when Harris showed him a bunch of hate mail she received when she was elected to bishop. Robinson, who himself made history in 2003 as the first openly gay bishop in the Episcopal Church, said Harris was always joyful. That was the source of her overcoming all the nastiness that came her way. Harris was known as a gifted storyteller who spoke out against racism, sexism, and homophobia during her time in the church. God has no favorites, she said in a 2009 sermon. So to you, gay man, lesbian woman, you bisexual person, transgender man or woman, you straight person, all of us, let us honor the sacrament of our baptism and our baptismal covenant, the only covenant we need to remain faithful. I want to turn now to looking at somebody a little closer to home. The photo here is of Autumn Peltier, who's an Indigenous clean water activist. She's a member of the... I wanted to move a little closer to home with this slide. This image is of Autumn Peltier, who is an Indigenous clean water activist. She told the CBC, "We keep seeing and hearing that there's First Nations communities that can't drink their water, that it's contaminated by pollution and pipelines breaking. One day it really affected me, and I actually cried about it." After this revelation, Peltier began to advocate for the universal right of clean drinking water at just 8 years of age. Peltier has also brought her message to the international community, and in 2015 she attended the Children's Climate Conference in Sweden, and in 2017 she received a nomination for the Children's International Peace Prize. I've posted her address to the UN on Blackboard for you to watch.